And with that said, it's very interesting that this morning's Torah reading speaks almost centrally or entirely about the story of Noah. And if you know the Hebrew spelling for the word Noach, Noah is the English name, the reverse of Noach is Chaim. Chaim being beautiful, graceful, kind, compassionate. And it is a beautiful way to describe someone, and that's why the Midrash, the rabbis, make that analogy almost immediately. After 40 days of rain, 40 days and 40 nights, we wonder about how Noah kept his sanity, cooped up on an ark filled with animals, all making demands on him all the time. How is it possible he kept himself sane? And God, in this week's Torah portion, says, V'Noach matzah chen be'enei Adonai, that Noah found favor in God's eyes, making the play on the word Noach and chen. Marty, you're really helping me this morning.
Come up and finish it for
He could. And it's written out here if you want. I love this verse because it contains a kind of geometry that the letters of Noach's name, Noach, are mirrored in the letters Chen, grace. Breshit Rabbah, one of the great compilations of Midrash, notices this and marvels that the name of the man who saved the world itself is a reflection of grace. God could have wiped out the entire world, not including Noah. God could have said, I've had enough of this world, and decided not to continue on with humanity. We haven't come so far since then. But God, as an act of grace, an act of chen, allows us to continue. The Kli Yakar, a great commentary on Rashi, notes that Noah's grace wasn't simply a personality trait. His chen was a kind of spiritual equilibrium, a balance between judgment and mercy. Noah's inner calm, his Noach, his restfulness, allowed him to carry on grace in a chaotic world, offering refuge and hope to all of life that surrounded him. Playing on the words Noach and chen, grace and calmness, we learn an incredibly important lesson. The flood can be seen as a story about destruction, but it also can be seen as a story about hope. The waters come, the world is washed clean, and life does continue. But it doesn't continue automatically. It continues because someone embodies grace. Someone stands in a living ark amidst a storm. What does that mean for us today? The floodwaters we may face may not be literal, but they are very real. Michelle, you spoke so beautifully of the difficulties facing the world right now. Our floods might be the unrelenting stress of modern life, the anxiety of the news cycle, the pressures at work and home, the moral confusion we see all around us. Sometimes it even comes from within us. Temptations and distractions, the inner critic that tells us constantly we're not enough, the static noise of negativity in our heads. The Kotzker Rebbe says something beautiful. Every generation and every person has their own floodwaters. Waves of confusion, of temptation, of distraction that threaten to bring down the soul, to drown the soul in its waters. You may have heard the famous statement by John Kabat-Zinn, who says, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf. Noah's challenge was monumental, but ours is no less urgent. to remain upright, to remain gracious, to remain human in a world that can feel so overwhelming. Our waves may not be literal waters, but our task is the same, and that is to find balance, to navigate with care, to become living arcs for others. In fact, the story reminds me so much of Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. Remember, she is swept away by a storm to an unfamiliar world, far from home, with danger all around, yet she moves forward, guided by courage, friendship, and a clear sense of purpose, learning all the way that she's always had the tools she needed to make it back to her hometown. She had the tools of love, of wisdom, of heart. And she recognizes they're in her all along. Noah's journey is similar. The ark is built, the storm comes, the work is hard, but grace and purpose carry him all the way forward. When we think about Noah, it's tempting to focus on survival, how he built the ark, how he gathered the animals, how he waited out the storm. But the deeper lesson is about spiritual action. Noah's grace, his chen, was active. It was expressed in how he responded to God, in how he carried life forward. The Kabbalists take that even one step further. The Zohar, the fundamental and foundational text of Jewish mysticism, teaches that the ark itself, the teva, is not just a vessel of wood, but it's a vessel of word and intention. The letters of the Torah, the rhythm of prayer, the deeds of kindness, all create an ark strong enough to carry the world through chaos. In mystical terms, the ark is the embodiment of the divine presence in a world filled with uncertainty. The Zohar itself is a remarkable text. Written in the 13th century in Spain, it's a collection of mystical commentaries on the Torah. It's rich with symbolism and poetic language and metaphysical insight. But tradition holds that one should be at least 40 years old before seriously undertaking the study of Kabbalah. Well, I'm turning 60, so I think I'm ready. I think I'm called a late bloomer. I feel I'm ready to absorb these mystical and deep messages. Perhaps that's another lesson of Noah. Growth sometimes takes time. Some wisdom can only be received once someone has lived long enough to understand the storms of life. What fascinates me is how these ideas converge with something I've been emphasizing in our community for so long. And that is the letters GHC. You know, if you were here on the high holidays, you know what's coming. GHC stands not just for Greenberg Hebrew Center, but for grace, humility, and compassion. The same principles that made Noah's life graceful, his chen, are the very qualities we're called to embody today. Noah teaches us that being good is what we wish to see in the world, and therefore we must inhabit it. It requires work, attention, and moral courage. It requires that we become both Noah, the foundation of righteousness, and the ark, the vessel through which goodness flows to others. When we choose goodness in our words, humility in our approach, and compassion in our deeds, we create small arks in our own lives. We offer refuge then to those around us. We become conduits of the divine presence, just as Noah carried life forward through the stormy waters. Even when the flood feels like it's overwhelming us, even when the world seems chaotic, every small act of grace matters. A kind word to a neighbor, a gesture of support to a friend, a willingness to listen, a commitment to fairness and integrity. These are the planks of our personal arcs. They may seem small, but together they preserve life, hope, and holiness. Another insight from the Kli Yakar that resonates deeply is this balance between judgment and mercy. The flood was an act of divine judgment, but within it, grace was always present. Noah's relentlessness allowed his restfulness, and it allowed him to embody grace. This is a lesson for us. Even in moments of difficulty, when judgment feels harsh, when we feel the world may be personally against us, we may feel that the world is in general chaotic, there's always a path to renewal. The rainbow that appears after the flood is a symbol of this. It's a sign that light can return even to the darkest moments, that the divine promise of hope always remains, that new life is always possible. In our own lives, we may be unable to see those rainbows, but every action of goodness and kindness and compassion is a reflection of divine light. Every moment we choose to act with humility, with compassion, or with integrity is a rainbow emerging in the storms around us. So, what does this mean for us practically, for each of us in our daily lives? I'll offer you these. Look for your inner Noah. Look for your inner grace, your inner kindness, your calmness, and your moral behavior. How can your presence become a source of stability and hope for others? Another, build your own ark. This isn't about literal construction, it's about creating spaces of holiness. Whether it's through prayer or study or meditation or acts of kindness, you're building a vessel that can carry goodness. Another, live with intentionality. The flood reminds us that life can be fragile, that our choices matter. When we act with integrity, humility, and compassion, we ensure that life, hope, and renewal continue. Be the rainbow. The rainbow is not just a promise from God, it's a metaphor for human action. Each act of goodness, each moment of grace becomes a ray of light in sometimes a dark world. Learn to surf the waves. You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf, says Zinn. Like Dorothy navigating the tornado of Oz, or Noah navigating the flood, we may not have control over the storms of life, but we can navigate them with a balance of grace and courage. That is our ark. So today I invite everyone to reflect on the waters in our own life, the challenges, the distractions, the storms. And then I ask, where is your Noah? And what is your ark? Where is the grace that you can offer today? So I pray we all find our own Noah, our inner restfulness, and let it guide our words and deeds. May we carry goodness, humility, and compassion into every corner of our lives, becoming living arks of hope, light, and renewal. And may the rainbows we create in our lives remind us that every day, even after the darkest floods, divine light and human goodness can and do return. Shabbat Shalom. We continue with Musaf on page 184. It's introduced by the Chatzi Kaddish. Please rise.